In this walkthrough, we'll be using a Next.js application to be able to receive a contact form input from a user, save it to NeonDB, and be able to send an email to an admin account notifying them that someone has submitted a contact form. The purpose of this walkthrough is to show that you can send a contact form entry in, save it to a database, and then be able to trigger an email based off of that. We're going to also be using Drizzle ORM to provide a translation layer between the TypeScript that we're writing for Next.js and put things into both Neon, a serverless database, and trigger a email. So let's do a real quick demo of our app here. Here, I'm just going to provide in my name real quick, the email that this person is providing, which in this case will just be my test email. The topic will be test, and the message here, hello, subscribe, like this video, and comment what else you'd like to see me build. Then we're going to send this message here. It says that the message has been saved and a notification has been queued, so a confirmation email has been sent. So let's just go over to my email real quick, hit refresh, and you can see that our email has been sent. And if we go into our Neon console here, into our table, you can see obviously some of the entries that were provided during the walkthrough itself, but you can see here the most recent one, which is with the subscribe, hello, all that good stuff in there. So yeah, we have this really great project that I think there will be a lot of things to learn from. You'll learn to validate things with Zod. We're also going to be using server actions and form actions instead of using React Hooks form. I think that generally I would reach for and use React Hooks form, but with the prevalence of agentic coding, I think that it would be important for more people to learn and understand server actions because that's typically the solution that AI reaches for. So, without further ado, let's jump right into the walkthrough itself. All right, we're here in the terminal. We're going to be using npx create next app, and we're going to be bootstrapping our Next.js, and we're going to be using the version 16 because it's the latest stable version that is currently available at the time of recording. And we're going to be creating our inbound app. So an app that allows for us to create a contact form and allow for someone to register, and then for us to use the Resend service in order to send them via API a email. Right? So we're going to hit enter here, and then we're going to go through all of the individual options. We're going to say yes to proceeding. We're going to use all of the recommended defaults. We're going to use TypeScript, ESLint, no React compiler, Tailwind CSS. We're not going to have a source directory. We're going to have an app router. We're going to be using the app router, and it's going to add in agents.md. We're not going to be using any AI features here, so we're not going to need the agents.md, but I'll just go through real quick each of the individual options here, and just so that you kind of understand and know what each one of them are. First off the list, we have TypeScript here. Super important to utilize type safety. I think everyone who uses JavaScript should attempt to upgrade up to TypeScript. You're just trying to close the amount of type errors that might come up within your code. It happens to everyone, and especially when we're working with web apps and mobile apps, you're going to be doing a lot of API calls and creating APIs. And so when we're exposing different interfaces for people to be able to pass data around, we want to be able to ensure that we enforce type safety using something like TypeScript so that when we ask for a string, we are sure that there's going to be an error thrown if someone tried to, let's say, pass in something that conflicts with a string, like undefined, right? That type of type safety really helps so that we don't have weird undefined behavior and close a lot of the different edge cases that come from not having type safety. ESLint, so it's another way of enforcing different types of lints. So if you're not familiar with what a linter is, it basically goes through your code and basically scans through a lot of the typical conventions that might cause issues. One of those is type safety that we just described. Some of these might be, right, that you have an asynchronous function and you're not calling an await against it, right? ESLint flags those types of kind of gotcha errors, right? And in writing code and writing long lines of code, and as more and more people are switching over to agentic coding, right? ESLint helps guard against weird, funky AI hallucinations, right? And even though they're becoming better and better, ESLint is just that kind of very cheap final check, right? Whether it's for an AI agent or for a newbie engineer, and even someone who is well and experienced and just writing thousands of lines of code, a mistake is going to eventually creep up. So let's just add in a very cheap and easy type check. Now, something that you'll be noticing, the React compiler. So in other programming languages like C, compilers generally will enforce type safety and do some kind of nascent error checking, right? That ESLint does part of. It also does warnings, which some compilers do, some don't. But the React compiler is a little bit different. What it does is it does auto optimizations for re-renders. So with React, basically when something changes, there are automatic re-renders, right? And a lot of times it's pretty fast because of various different optimizations. React compiler is one of those. Now, that's really necessary for large applications. For smaller applications, the native optimizations are good enough. But React compiler, for example, if we used memorization, right? So we have one specific value and of something, and when something changes to it, then it triggers a re-render, and React compiler is able to help handle that a little bit better. For small applications like the one that we're doing today, not needed. What is absolutely needed, and it's just because personally I don't really like dealing with CSS anymore, and so using Tailwind CSS, we get a little bit of nicer language or nicer, you know, syntax that we can utilize in order to write long form styles. And so, there's a lot of styles that are typically used, and those have been just turned into reusable syntax. So we'll see it in the code. We'll be viewing a lot of Tailwind CSS. You'll get a hang of it over time, but it's just a shorthand so that you don't have to write all of the CSS classes over and over again. By default, it says no source directory, and I might add in a source directory if I feel like it's needed just for cleanliness sakes. But if you're not doing some crazy TRPC monorepo, you probably don't need a source directory. But you know, uh, some people might be used to that, and I think it's just a stylistic thing. So if you feel like customizing that and adding in a source directory, totally cool with you doing that. We're just not going to probably be doing it for this particular walkthrough. App router just means we're going to be using the directory names as the URL stubs. So when we go to, google.com/something, right? In Next.js, that slash, home, right? If it's a home page, and we want it to be at URL or a domain name .com/, home, then we would need to create a home directory and then have a index.tsx with the home page there. And when we go to blank.com/home, it basically will show up once we have that home directory and the index.tsx there. And then agents.md, as I was saying, it's for AI stuff, any instructions that we want to provide. We're not going to be using AI. Not really a reason to remove it. We'll just leave it as one of the recommended defaults. So we're going to continue on, and I'll be right back as soon as it installs. Once we're done with the install, this is what we're going to have. Now we're going to cd into inbound, and we're going to set up two more services and then install the litany of various packages that we're going to be needing through our project. One of the first ones that we're going to install is shadcn UI. So just a really standard UI library that has a bunch of different pre-made components that we can select from, and we can own the code. That's one of the important reasons for using shadcn, is that we can go in and change anything that we don't really like, remove it, add a new one, refresh it. All the control is in our hands. The other one is Resend. So we want to be able to send emails. That's one of the tentpole packages that we're going to need. And so we're going to be installing that to be able to send emails via API. And then there's going to be a bunch of supporting packages for us to be able to take in the intake form and be able to handle some of the data storage and the API layer. So first, for shadcn, what we're going to do is npx shadcn at latest init. We're going to hit enter here, and we're going to hit yes to install this package. And we're going to let it reinstall. Then we can choose whether or not we want to use Radix UI or Base UI. Now, what's the difference? Radix has historically been the library from which shadcn was built on top of. But the team that's behind Radix, they've kind of been slowing down to not really working a lot on the Radix library anymore. And so really it's recommended that we switch to Base UI in order to leverage a active development team that's working on Base UI. But some people are used to the Radix. There's some minor things underneath the hood. For the sake of this walkthrough, I think that we're just going to try to use Base UI and just support this new team that's going to lay the groundwork for shadcn going forward, and we're just going to be using that. There shouldn't be much in terms of like major differences, but yeah, that's what we're going to be using. These are all different types of different icons. As you can see there, most of these use Lucid React. There's huge icons, Phosphor, and then different font styles, so you can choose which one you want. I'm pretty used to Lucid React, so I'm going to be using that one. And yeah, we're going to be using Geist, which is the kind of typical standard Next.js one. So if you're used to, the old shadcn, that's what Nova is. So we're going to select that and go from there. We'll let it install, and we'll be right back once it's done. All right, it just finished installing. Let's do code dot to open it up in VS Code so we can take a look at the button component. It'll be the first thing that we'll want to take a look at, just so that we can gain an understanding of some of the powerful things that are available to us in shadcn UI. Here in VS Code, let's take a look at the components directory that was just created here for shadcn. And we'll go through a full kind of tour of what exists within a Next.js application. But I just wanted to show off real quick what you can expect from a shadcn component. Let me just make this a little bit bigger. There we go. That's probably good middle ground there. So you can see that right off the bat, we can see all of the Tailwind CSS styling that is set already in advance for us in our button. And some of the different things that we can adjust besides the base version of the styling for a button is different variants. And I think more people will spend time in either creating their own variant, because creating a variant is just providing, name here, and then, Tailwind CSS classes goes here. And so whether it's providing a background, a primary, text, primary, foreground, and I can link in the description down below, like a little cheat sheet that tells you what each of these particularly are. We have hover BG primary divided by 80. So it's just an adjustment of the primary background when someone is hovering them. And there's a adjustment by 80 here. And that 80 that's being adjusted there is the opacity, right? So we're just setting from 100% opacity down to 80. And opacity is just how visible something is. And so, if 100% is fully visible, right, 0% is something's transparent, right, 80% we're just knocking it down the values by 20. And these are things that you're going to eventually learn about. Some of them sound a little bit strange, like border of border. But yeah, um, generally a lot easier than writing out all of the individual CSS. You can add a variant here, so you can see there's the default button. This is a button that has an outline, and let me just see here real quick. Let me just remove everything in here and then just render a button. So how do we render a button? We can add in a button and type out button here, and you can see a quirk of using base UI and Radix UI would appear here. That import goes on top. You just want to go down and utilize @component/UI button. That corresponds to this file here, right? Component/UI buttons. So make sure that when you're importing, right, you're importing from the second option, not the top option. You'll grab the base UI and then you're like, well, why are my custom things not in there? Oh, it's because I'm not pulling from the one that's in my directory, right? So if we have a button here, and let me just, let me remove the name one that I added here, pop this up, and just do npm or pnpm run dev to start the local host here. We'll pop it open in this browser. And one of the things you'll notice is that button needs something inside of it. So we'll just say, hello, I'm a button, to make it long enough so it's parent. There you go. So hello, I'm a button, right? And you can like click on the button. You can see there's a little minor click animation. I don't know if I can zoom in. Whoops. Zoom in. Oh, it's the same one. Yeah, there we go. So I'll make the button look pretty big, and you can see that there's a little kind of animation there on click, right? If I was being fancy, const clicked versus set clicked, use state. Not something that we're going to need, is just for the sake of demonstration, right? Boolean, and then it's going to be set to false, right? And then what a button can do, we can set an on click. So when we click on the button, what we're going to do is set click to be not clicked. So just toggling it, flipping the value. And then, we'll just have a p tag on top of here. And depending on whether or not we're clicked, we'll say, just clicked, not clicked, right? And so obviously what we have by default, if we popped over to here, let me just refresh this real quick. What's wrong? What's the issue? You're importing a, because it needs to be a client component. I'll add that at the top real quick. Use client. A little live demo here, so relax. So we're not clicked, right? But if I hit clicked, right? And then not clicked, and we're just toggling between the two. So it just shows you that I'm able to click the button. Now let's say we switch to outline here. It has a border. We change BG primary to BG background. What does that mean? Well, the background's white, right? So we're going to change the background here to white, and then we're going to add a border. So if I go into here and I add in variant, and if I do quotes here, you can see that I can have all of the valid variants that I added here. If I added another one, right, like name, I don't even need to add anything. If I just do name, right, and open up the quotes again, you can see that name has now been added, right? So whatever I might want to add on name, let's just say I want it to look exactly like default, but instead of BG primary, I want green 500, right? And then the same thing for the on hover. And so we're going to choose name, right? And then we go into here, right? And we have the green button. So you can see that I've defined a custom variant here. Cool. And, just to look at, right, we can switch it to outline, save. You can see the button's outline, and then the background matches the outer background here. Again, if I change this to red 500, right, then, right, we have a red button there. Okay, so you can override an existing outline if you'd like. And then, like we can go through and just look at some of the others, right? Ghost is often used. It's just the text, but when you can hover it, I don't know if you can kind of see it. It's a little gray on the inside. Let me see if I can look for hover muted instead of muted. We'll just do gray of 300. That should make it more apparent. Yeah, there you go. Right? You can see on hover, but initially it doesn't look like a button, right? This might be useful for creating like hyperlinks or icon buttons, right? That you only want to hover around an icon when someone's hovering over it, right? Or to have a background color when someone's hovering over it. So cool. Let me just return these back to normal. Some different things. We have different sizes here. More apparent when we're using a icon. So let's just, instead of using this, we'll do chevron. Or how about this? We'll do clicked. And if we're clicked, then we will show the chevron down icon from Lucid React, right? So I'm showing how Lucid React works, and we've installed it as a part of ShadCN. And then we'll do chevron up. So we have two separate icons. I don't know if you saw earlier, you can see a little preview here based off of the different icons. And, if you go through all of them, you can see all the different types that we have, right? And there's also a catalog online that you can look at for all the Lucid icons, right? But obviously when we click, we can just have that kind of flip back and forth. And Ghost is probably one of the ways that you would want to use a button alongside a link or on an icon. Because, you might not want to have like a little outline around or a thick background around it until someone's actually hovered over it. And the hover effect in, kind of design theory is a way to indicate to the user that, hey, there's some interactivity with this icon here. And, kind of it, by extension, this is some form of clickable button, right? So cool. Just a little demonstration of some of the things that you can do. Oh yeah, size here, right? So the reason with the icon is, right, if you do size of large, right, that's kind of the normal one, I believe. A little bit taller, right? Height of 9 versus height of 8. If I do icon, which is 8, if I do extra small, will it show? Let's see. Yeah, so I don't know if you just saw like that just moved down a little bit from the height. I think it would be more apparent if I did outline here, and you can see that it's a little flatter here. And then if I changed it from that to large, right, bigger, I think we have extra large as well. No. So another thing that is useful here is that if we tried to use a size that's not currently registered, you can see that it throws an error, right? So if I did extra large, it's not part of it, right? So we have small, small, a little bit more squished, right, compared to extra small. And then we can have the icon one, which, yeah, it's square basically. So cool. Those are the different options there. I think there's one more default variance. So this is where you can set which one you want to use by default, right? There's obviously, you can just set the default if you want, but this is actually where if you didn't provide variant, right? Then obviously it would go to the default black background icon here. If we change default variance to outline, and refresh, does that not? Wonder why that overrode. Usually should. Variant of outline? Yeah, it should. I wonder why. Is there something else in our button that we would have to change? Let me just look through. Oh, okay. Here, I didn't even see right underneath here. Some of you might have seen it. Okay, so if you want to change the default variance, you're also going to have to change it here. I don't know why they set it that way. I feel like it should be just this, and so then variant just passes through. If you do that, right, and then just do this one as default, then yeah, outlines the ones it's selected. Interesting. So this one's really the one that that matters compared to this. You don't even need this because all you would do is just set whatever default you want to be here. That's weird. Yeah, because this one's not really needed if you want to set it. I mean, I guess it looks nicer, but then it just gets overridden by this. So Shad CN, that's kind of weird. I'd love to hear why they designed it that way. But anyways, just scroll down a little bit and you see why that wasn't working. But anyways, obviously you can see that you have full control. So if you ran into an issue with Shad CN, you can adjust it without needing to, bug someone on GitHub to fix the issue. So cool. That's ShadCN. We can have many different components, and we will be using a lot of them. And so it's good to get familiarized with it. Next, let's install Resend. Next, we're going to do npm install resend so that we can get contact notifications sent out once we get our contact form done. Then we're going to have npm install Zod. So anybody who's followed this channel before will know Zod for type checking. It's a step beyond TypeScript type checking, but it works with complex objects as well and allows for us to define types in deeper granularity. So and is especially useful when we're formatting our APIs and be able to transmit types in that manner. What I was talking about before, TypeScript basically allows for you to use, the TypeScript version of Zod. Next, we're going to have using Neon and Drizzle ORM for our serverless database. So we need a place to be able to store the information that a user gives us in the contact form. We'll be storing them in our Neon database, and Drizzle ORM is the translation layer going from TypeScript to Postgres SQL. And so based off of that, we'll be using the Drizzle ORM package and the Neon database serverless package. We'll be right back once that's finished installing. Okay, that was quicker than I expected. Then we're going to do npm install -- save dev drizzle kit. And so what is that basically being used for? When we are creating the schema for what our database needs to look like, we need to get that information up to Neon so that when they create our database, they know what the schema needs to look like. We'll look more into detail on that, but basically, DrizzleKit is the tool that we're going to be using to push schema up to our Neon database. So we're going to install that. The reason that it's dev dependency, we only seed the database, or not just seed the database, but give that schema and push that schema up to Neon during development time. We don't need that during production, right? And it's pretty bad if we're modifying the schema of our database during production. And so we add it as just a dev dependency specifically, so that when we go into our production build, DrizzleKit gets excluded. The last thing that we're going to add is we're going to use some playwright testing later on. So if you've never used it, it's something that AI has been incredibly leaning towards in order to test front end and different interactions. So I think it's important for us to be able to showcase how to use Playwright so that we can properly smoke test our websites. We'll see more of that once we come to the tail end and start, testing before we actually demo the product that you saw at the beginning of this video. So we'll just install this. And once we're done, let's switch back over to VS Code real quick. One of the things that we're going to want to add is we're going to have Neon and we're going to have Resend. And so we're basically going to have two independent services, and we're going to need to grab the ways in which we're going to interact with them. For Neon, it's a database URL. It's basically providing the location of where our database is so that authorized users can query against it. As for Resend, right, we need to receive an API key from Resend that basically, you know, allows for us to, be billed for any emails that we're sending over the free limit that they've set. We also need to provide the contact email. So, what is the to email and what is the from email? And so, we're just going to be dealing with, a few examples. So it's not going to be something that's super exhaustive, but just to demonstrate how you can get email notifications up and out there. So one of the things that we're going to do is create a .env .example here, and let's fill it out. So what's going to be going in our .environment .example here? Well, this is just to show you what you need to put into eventually. If we just click out of everything here and hit new file and then add .environment .local, right? Basically what you're going to do is go to Neon and pull your database URL, and then here we have the resend API key. We'll go into resend in a second, but I'll start off with Neon DB. We're going to have two database URLs technically. So we're going to do one that's named pooled and then one that is named unpooled. I just copy this, bring the same one here, and then bring that inside of here. So we have 5 of them that we need to put in here. And so, and I need to make sure that they are named the same. Cool. So .environment.example is the file that you're going to carry forth in your Git repo when you eventually package everything up that's created today in this walkthrough and then push it up to your GitHub. You're going to keep your .environment.example. Your .environment.local will have your private keys, right? The database URL that Neon has given you. If you allow for it to be out there in public, then anybody's going to be able to use your database. Not great. And then obviously with the resend API key, that means anybody can use your API key to send, emails and whatever they want to send. So you want to keep things in .environment.local private. Here you can see, right, that we have .env star here, and .environment.local is included within that. But if you were worried, it's never much to hurt to add .environment.local explicitly. And in fact, it's probably better if we remove this, because if we kept .environment wildcard, as you can see here with .environment.example not being highlighted, it's not going to be committed. So it's in fact better to do just .environment.local. You can see here the green highlighting, which means .environment.example is committed, and that's what we want to commit. We don't want to commit our actual environment variables, which are all private. We instead want to commit the .environment.example, which shows people what environment variables that you need to bring to the project to be able to run it. Great. So just to discuss some of the actual environment variables. So database URL grabbed from Neon. We'll take a look at that inside of the Neon console in a second. There's pooled versus unpooled, which I added. And the reason for that is it's kind of standard practice nowadays. So unpooled means you just have a direct access to the database itself, direct access to the database URL. With database URL pooled, there's something called a PG bouncer, which basically is a bunch of shared connections that you can have. Now imagine if you have multiple instances of an application being run, right? You might have a lot of different apps trying to tap into the same database. And so just by saying there's pooled connections means that Neon has a bouncer system that is able to take on and manage all of these different potential connections to the database, whether someone is trying to do a CRUD operations, so create, read, update, delete. Those are individual operations which take time, which require some form of connection. So instead of having a direct connection to the database, because that means that you can have multiple apps trying to do potentially the same thing, potentially different, and if they're all connected to the same database URL all at once, well, that's really dangerous, because one thing could be trying to create a resource that another one is trying to create an exact copy of, and those two would obviously create a collision if they're on the same URL. By having each one of them, or sorry, not different, not the same URL, different, same connection to the database URL. By having different ones, you can basically say, hey, this one was here first, so first one in wins, right? And that's the way that you would guard against potential conflicts. So in live apps, right, just the standard convention, live apps use database URL pooled for things like pushing our schema the first time onto the database, so that Neon knows what type of database to be able to provision, right, within setting up the tables and all that type of stuff. We do that with an unpooled connection, right? So that's Neon right there. Then I'd explained before the Resend API key, contact email to and from. By default, you can just use resends from email, but that's just in the email from category. That's what is going to be appearing. So you can register in Resend what your actual email URL is. They just want to make sure that you actually own the domain, but it can be the default one like this, it could be a Gmail. It just has to have some proof that you own that email. And technically, you could have the same email that's from, that is the one that is to. Contact email to just means when someone replies to it, what is the email that's catching it, right? You might have onboarding at resend.dev, right? But you might want to have a email being sent to, a team at, google.com or whatever example.com you're using, right? Whoever, because it might be a mailing list, right? Or it might be a inbox for your company. You might want to have your um, uh, user replies to an automated email route to a particular email box. So that's what this is for. And so let's switch over and go over to the Neon console to be able to pull these two URLs. All right, so we're here in the Neon console here. Let me just zoom in so that everything's a little bit readable. You can see that we have some databases from an old walkthrough that I've done. But the thing that we're going to need after you've logged into the console is new project. Now, you might have to click through a couple of onboarding things in order to get to the screen, but once you get to the screen, you know that you're golden. And we're just going to call the project name or provide the project name, which is inbound. All of these are just default normal stuff. You don't have to worry about it. There's also a free plan here. So, very, very generous, in my opinion, by Neon to be able to provide this service. And so let's create the inbound database. Now, you go over to the tables, there's nothing here yet because we haven't defined a schema, but it's here ready to receive if we're able to connect. And so here we have our connection string. And so this right here, connection pooling, corresponds to, right, database URL pooled versus unpooled. So if you hit the radio button here, you can see that we're not in connection pooling. If you hit it, we are, and you can see the pooler text here. I know it's kind of small. If you see the pooler text here, then that's the connection pooling one. If it's not there, then that's the unpooled one. So we're just going to be able to copy the snippet here and be able to paste it into our .environment local. Now, let's say, for example, oh no, I've leaked my database URL. Now anybody could access it, right? Shoot, my bad. Will I have to delete the database now at this point? No. What we're going to do is just hit reset password, hit reset. Not going to show the new password. But now it's completely different. And so now I can copy that snippet and be able to paste it in for the pooled version. And then we just hit this for the unpooled, copy snippet, and paste it into the unpooled side here. So you notice that quotes versus unquotes here, unquoted string here, they're the same, so you don't have to worry about that. You can provide quotes if you want. We're able to handle both of them. So that is NeonDB. All right, we are here on the Resend website. Fairly simple. As soon as you log in with your email, you're just going to be asked to add an API key. So we'll hit that. We will hit copy without actually viewing the contents of it that is inside. And then you will paste it into your .environment.local, obviously hidden for me, but just put it within the Resend API key. Now I've gone ahead and done that inside of my .environment.locals. Put the email that you would like to have the email be sent to you. And you can just keep this for the sake of the tutorial the same, but outside of the walkthrough and in your own production environment, you'll obviously want to send the your company email, right? However you're using this. So there we go. We've set up Resend and Neon. We're now smooth sailing, just writing code from now on. So let's jump into the code. All right, for the code bits, we're going to be modifying two things specifically. So the first one will be package.json down here. I don't know if you can see, but it's right next to me. I don't know if I point my head at it. Yeah, it's right there. Right, so hit that, open it up. We're going to be changing a couple of things inside of here. One of the first things is we're going to have type module on the top level. So type to be module here. So as you can read here, when set to module, the type field allows a package to specify all .javascript files within our ES modules. If the type field is omitted or set to common.js, all JS files are treated as common.js. So why do we care about that? Let's take a look at the other file that we're going to be editing, layout.tsx here. You can see that here at the top here, we have import. We have a bunch of different other modules out there that we are importing things from. This way we can separate things out to a bunch of different files. If we're using common.js, the syntax is require. And it's typically used for like literal scripts, right? And in the case of Next.js and React apps, typically it's test files, right? So, .mts files with the T being in the middle, being the type of module files that are for testing, right? In this way, if we didn't have this and we tried to test with our application, right, we would run into errors with this import here because it would say in common.js, we're looking for require, not import, right? So just by adding this piece in here, we're able to do those tests specifically. The other thing, we want to look at the scripts here. The first one that we're going to be adding is the script to help manage our database pushes. And so that is just a quick shorthand way to do drizzle-kit push. Sometimes I'll just write npx drizzle kit push instead of npx db :push, but some extra keystrokes that you're saving. Then we have the smoke test that we're going to be running with playwright. This one's kind of long, so I'll just copy this in here. We need a comma up top here, and we'll have one more line underneath, so that's why we have this trailing comma. But this is the command to be able to run the playwright tests, which is kind of some automation smoke tests to make sure that the things that we're expecting to happen in our application actually do occur. And our tests are only as good as the tests we write. So hopefully we'll be able to button it up pretty well within contact form smoke.spec.mjs. And the browser that typically we would use for testing is Chromium, right? And yeah, we're just be able to report stuff inline. Then we have the test here, which will be node dash dash test dash dash experimental strip types source dash library slash star dot test dot mts. So right, the module allows for us to say, hey, every other .tsx, .ts, whatever is different than the .mts. Those require the require statement, but for all the TSs, we're going to be using the import syntax. So great. Some optional things if you want to do it. Don't know if it's up to you and your particular machine, right? But if you're running it in a VM or you need to install Node, you might want to pin the Node version, right? And so if we're using the, for example, experimental strip types, then we might need to explicitly specify, and I think it would be best to just put it by the bottom here, the engines here to be Node, and Node needs to be greater than 22.6, the version type, to be able to utilize this flag here. But it's optional. If you know that your Node version is higher, then that's great. This is just a way of conforming it, so we'll leave it in there. So yeah, everything else was based off of the npm installs, so that's why we have all of our dependencies here. And so yeah, everything is done for package.json. Then inside of our layout.tsx here, on the inside, the thing that we're going to be changing is changing the title. So this title here, on the top of, like let's say this is a browser, right? On the top tab here, it would be saying create next app. And actually, let me just run this real quick. PNPM run dev. I think we can show it off. Let me see here. If I run local here, right, you see create next app. If I changed this to inbound, not onboard, inboard, inbound, right, you can see that the top now says inboard. Great. Inbound, sorry. Oh my gosh. And then the description here, right? Contact form sending info to Neon for storage. Send email notif via resend. So when would a description appear? Well, let's say that you are texting someone a link, right? And sometimes it appears that little preview, and you would see the title, and sometimes there's just a little bit underneath it. In this case, that little bit would be the description. And if you're web scraping or web crawling, right, the description would be collected alongside that. We had selected Geis before when we chose Nova as the theme for our Shad CN. So we have Geis here, which mirrors that and is the Next.js convention, typical one that is used. Then inside of the layout.tsx, I don't think we need anything else. So yeah, that was pretty much the only thing that needed to be changed. So we all look good there. All right, now we're on to the step of creating our database schema. And where we're going to put that is creating a new folder at our root here. And we're going to create a DB folder. Well, it should not be an app, so make sure that that's not in there. We should have it be at the root level here. And this is probably one of the reasons why having a source directory is helpful. You're just right-clicking on source and being able to add things instead of relying on making sure that you click out of everything and then hit something at the root. But it's just a matter of personal preference. So inside of DB here, we're going to have two different files. We're going to have a schema.ts and we're going to have a client.ts. Sometimes I name this index.ts, doesn't matter. They're both functionally the same. So those two files inside of DB, and then another file at the root here, drizzle.config.ts. Great. And before we fill out our ts or config drizzle.config.ts, what we're going to do is npm install-d for dev dependency. We're going to add in .environment in here to be able to read our .environment.local environment variables. And so when we paste this in here, you can see that we've configured the path to be .environment.local. And here you can see Drizzle kit runs as a plain node process, does not inherit Next.js's automatic .environment.local loading. So usually when someone does process .environment inside of a Next.js project, Next.js is able to handle that loading, but this drizzle.config.ts is created outside of the Next.js application here. So thus we need to use .environment to be able to show it the path to our environment variables. So great. And then here we're defining our config, which allows for DrizzleKit to understand where our schema is, right? And in fact, we're not using source here. So it's ./db/schema.ts. The output, whatever is outputted from the DrizzleKit push process, will be put inside of a ./drizzle directory. So you'll see a new Drizzle directory created. We are using Postgres SQL. That's what Neon databases are, Postgres. And then our database credentials. So here, as it says here, migrations use the direct/unpooled connection. So make sure that's why we're using unpooled here. And this one just basically says that for all the potential applications that are out there, they require a stable session, and so the transaction pooling can interfere with our schema push. So thus we need to use the direct connection. And the reason that we have this quote unquote is that in our .environment.local, you can see here it's string or undefined. I could potentially have forgotten or misspelled database URL unpooled. So it could be undefined. And so we're just basically, and there's two ways of dealing with. We could provide this by saying, if this is undefined, then just provide empty string, and then it'll error out because it's not a valid database URL. Or we can just assert, right, with the exclamation point here, we can assert that this value will be a string that I remembered to put database URL unpooled inside of my .environment.local, and that I spelt it correctly. So it's always important, if you have your .environment, just grab this, right, and then paste it in. Obviously, I was copy pasting anyways, so it doesn't matter. But for all of you who may be hand typing it, this is the one time. Don't hand type this, because if you typed it in wrong, someone like me who mistypes things a lot, you're going to hit a really weird looking error, and you're going to be really frustrated to figure out what is wrong with your, either drizzle config.ts. A little bit easier to suss out because it's just one file, but let's say it was at runtime in your app, you have a weird Neon error. You're going to start blaming Neon when it's probably you misspelled database URL inside of your project. So copy paste, copy paste, copy paste. Do it. So great. Before we can actually push, we actually need to set up our Neon. Actually, we need to set up our schema first. Then we can set up the client, because the client is what our app will be using to communicate with Neon. So we don't need that just yet. We do need our schema though. And it'll be quite simple. We are going to paste this in here. So we're creating a table here. We're naming it contact submissions, and naming the TypeScript version of it contact submissions in case we need to reference it in our code. And hint, hint, with the export here, we will be using it in our code base. It has these columns. So tables are split up in columns and rows. Think of it like Excel, right? You have columns and rows in your Excel spreadsheet. In this table, you have all of the columns going along the top. You have each of the individual labels. You have ID, name, email, topic, message, so on and so forth, right? And we need to define the type of the value that is going to be going in each of the columns. And each of the rows are what are known as entries into the table, right? So, if I provide a submission, I am one entry in the table. And how do I discern that I don't accidentally put more than one of the same contact in there? There are a couple ways of doing it. One is if we were assigning an ID based off of something, um, based off of, let's say, the combination of your name, your email, and the topic, right, which is like the subject line. Then, you smash them all together and produce a quasi unique ID there, right? Then you can say that, hey, that one is a unique one because text here, which says that an ID needs to be of type text or corresponds to string, needs to be a primary key. Primary key is the way in which we can search for contact submissions. It explicitly makes the column not null and also is a unique ID. You can't put the same ID over and over and over again within this table. Another way is we could, let's say you don't want the same email submitting the same contact form over and over again. You can do unique here, right? So not null, meaning that someone has to provide an email value, but we can also say that it needs to be a unique email, right? That I, blah, blah, blah at gmail.com. I can only submit once to the contact form if there was this unique identifier here, right? Why wouldn't I want to do, dot unique on name? Multiple people could have the same name. Topic, obviously, some people might write the same topic message. How implausible that could be. Someone could just write the same message. You don't want to gate that by unique. Here we have an enumerated value that's being stored as text. We're basically saying that this email status could be of three enumerated values stored as text: pending, sent, and failure, not null. So you have to have an email status. And then the email provider ID. That's something we'll deal with it in a little bit. Hard to explain just in the schema here. And then we have a created at, when the submission was obviously created at, updated at. I don't remember if I had added a edit functionality. I don't think so. So we don't know if we really need it, but let's say we had a like checked off Boolean value, right? Like checked, and then it's Boolean, right? Checked dot not null dot default false, right? And then we need to actually pull it in. I think I might actually, oh nope, not that one. Boolean PG core, there we go. Make sure that you're grabbing it from PG core. Many other types, but we're using Postgres here. So Boolean, right, we're saying that it has to have a Boolean value, but by default we're adding it to false, so technically the user doesn't need to set it. We'll just say checked is false. And let's say that we flipped the checked value in like an admin dashboard. We can hit updated at so that we know that that's when we last checked off the contact submission, right? For whatever reason, like we checked the email, we want to mark it as read. That's a way of doing it, right? Like instead of checked, we could do read, right? Read message, something like that, right? And then read underscore message. we can have the updated at to be able to do that. Now, I don't have this for this tutorial. If you were interested in seeing, like, let's say, like a admin dashboard where we can just list out all of the contacts, and that should be hidden away from the users, I'd be happy to make that update to um, this walkthrough and just make it as like a sequel showing some authentication functionality and an admin dashboard. Maybe the ability to have people send emails to each other, which means that they need to have been logged in to the inbound service. And let's say for whatever reason, this dangerous, but I'm just thinking of contrived reasons. You needed someone, well, let's say that it's a company email, right? And so companies are allowed to read all of the messages that are being sent around, and you need someone for security reasons to audit, make sure that none of your employees are leaking, corporate secrets. And so you need to have an admin who's able to read everybody's messages. That could be an admin dashboard that I build, right? You have unauthenticated users who aren't able to send a message or are able to send a message, but they'll be marked as like something, outside of the organization, right? Then you can have like an email client, right? That's sending emails around to authorized users who are signed up or approved, whitelisted by admins who are specifically labeled, either hard coded or provided in environment variables, given a magic email, magic link to be able to log in as a admin. Whatever the case may be, we're going to need a separate dashboard for them to manage who are the authorized users who are allowed in, who are not allowed in, what messages are being sent, all that type of stuff. And yeah, like that would be a really cool project. Comment down below. I'd be happy to do it. Great. So let's remove read message for now. It's out of scope for this, but I just wanted to showcase, right, like why you would need updated at. So a little bit of future proofing. So great. Now we'll be able to, and actually let me just go into the terminal. This will be a little bit easier here. And then we'll do npx db push and execute this. Sorry, the command is npx run db push. And there we go. Oh, we have a bit of an issue here. Let's see here. Sorry, npm run db push. My bad. There we go. I don't know why that. Yeah. So you would do it like npx drizzle kit push, I believe. Yeah, that does the same thing. So I was mixing the two together. But yeah, those are two different ways. I don't know. One a little bit less text than the other, I guess, but both of them do functionally the same thing. Both of them pushing things up to our schema. So let me pull up Neon real quick, and so we can take a look at the table that was created. All right, we are back here in our Neon database, and if I go down to tables again, right, in this little sidebar here, just going down to tables, you'll see that we have the contact submissions table. We have along the top here various columns. We have ID, name, email, topic, right? If I just scroll through, yeah, message, email status, email, provider ID, created at, and updated at. So we're all set. We're ready to push data. So now we need to create a client that is able to connect, right? Those the pooled connections, and get things rolling there. So great. All right, back in VS Code here. Let's jump over to client.ts here and paste this in. So just to go over some of the different parts here, right? We have our Neon database serverless. We're going to be using Neon HTTP. That's the specific Drizzle connection that we're going to be making here. We're going to be exporting everything from schema. So technically, even though we only have contact submissions, we're going to need to grab our schema as a whole. So that's what star as schema allows for us to do. And then we're creating a function here, getDB. And inside of this, what we're going to be doing is making sure that our database URL is not undefined. And so here, if it's not undefined, or sorry, we need to make sure that it's not undefined, right? Um, if it is not a string and thus undefined, then we're going to throw an error. But if it is a valid string, then we pass that string into Neon. And what we are creating here is a query function. SQL will query via HTTP a one-time request with SQL instructions up to Neon in order to execute, right? Our CRUD operations, create, read, update, delete, all those types of things. That's what this handles. Now, we obviously don't want to write in SQL, or at least because our React and Next.js applications are written in TypeScript, we don't want to start introducing too much. Sometimes we have to for advanced SQL features. But for the most part, we want to write as much TypeScript and have as much TypeScript consistency throughout our application. And so Drizzle basically wraps this execution function here and provides in our schema as well to translate both of those into SQL from, right, our TypeScript friendly language, right? So this is TypeScript. What we're going to be writing later on is going to be in TypeScript that we're going to be interacting with our database. It's all going to be in TypeScript. Drizzle basically is able to take all of that, all the things that are being executed from the TypeScript side, turn it into, translate it into SQL, and then push it or have SQL here, this executioner function, this query function here, to query and send it up to Neon to be able to work with. So that's what we're doing with this client.ts. Great. So that's pretty much all the things that we need to be able to set up on our functionality here, or for our database here. And now we're going to be moving on to implementing the functionality. We're going to be using server actions, no TRPC for this. I think it's interesting if we, put TRPC aside, however great it is. Let's start using some server actions. It is an option in the toolbox so that we know how to use it. So when AI decides to use server actions, we know what it's doing. We know what are some of the pitfalls, some of the errors that could arise, and we can dip into the code and provide a very targeted fix instead of, just describing the issue at a high level and then hoping that the AI is able to figure it out, right? So this is an important part of education. We know what all of these different tools in our toolbox are so that we can actually go in and fix things. Great. So now we're going to start working on a little bit of UI. So we're going to go into app here. We're going to go into page.tsx. We had our little example here. We're just going to remove everything inside of here for now and basically start fresh. So some of the things that we want to think about here is that I'm going to add in a component here. So first, let's take it from the top here. So we just have a real quick input class here with all the Tailwind CSS that's related to it. Then we have the proof item component here. Takes in 3 props, icon, label, and value. We've given them the type. So icon's going to be a React node of the Lucid React icons that we'll be providing inside of the proof item. Then we'll have a label and a value. So what is this for? It's basically just for demo purposes to show, since we don't have an admin dashboard, just to show that the contact form has been submitted and registered within our database. So it's, as it says, a proof item, just to showcase that, I'm not full of S, right? And I'm actually able to get things into the database, right? Here, you'll actually see that I added here a deprecated Tailwind class here, right? And so typically you'll see this. This is just deprecated. It's just a different way of being able to rewrite this. And so we can add here wrap break words, right? And it's essentially the same thing. I don't really know why, IntelliSense brings it up. I'm sure it's a Tailwind convention, right? Here it's like suggest canonical classes. So Tailwind says that this is how you should write it instead of just break words, but both of them are essentially working the same. So not really sure the importance of that, but yeah. We can do this just to avoid the scary squiggly lines, right? So we have wrap break word, and if you notice, right, in the IntelliSense here, right, that's the exact same one, right? You can see here break word. If I just removed this and then hovered over it, right, we'd still have the same overflow wrap break word. So they're functionally the same. I don't know why that's a thing, but whatever. I don't know if they wanted to add more classes and somehow break word was somehow different than a wrap break word, sure. But for now, I don't really see the big deal. Below this, we'll add the actual home page. So I'm just going to paste this in. It's all just a long React component. So I really see no reason for me to type it all out. The only thing I will do is provide the imports, right? So grab it from Lucid React, database, same way. Mail check the last Lucid React icon. Then here you can see here's our submit form. And so, we just have some header stuff, some typical stuff that you might see in a contact form, right? Prompting someone to contact the team, a little subtitle here, ask about a project sponsorship or tutorial request, then to provide the name, Ada Lovelace, famous scientist, or computer scientist specifically, provide the email, ada@example.com, the topic, right, the placeholder that's being provided there, project inquiry, to be able to do that. Same thing here with a wider text area, right? Tell us what you want to build. And then we have a button here. Make sure that you grab it from @components UI button. And then we're going to have a send icon as well. And then on the bottom here, right, it just talks about like when the last submission is. And so we'll be adding in more features, as you can see here, right? Nothing's wired up, right? So we'll have more stuff that we'll be adding a little bit later. Right now, I just want to showcase the entire UI. So I'm just going to scroll through it down really quick in case you wanted to copy it down. The code, the final code will be in the link down in the description. So if you just wanted to copy to learn this just in time, feel free to copy it down. It's really how I think most people learn anyways. But, if you were just wanting to see the final code or to copy paste things, then the link to the GitHub will be down in the description. And yeah, so that's that done and dusted. Next, we're going to create the actual contact form, and specifically to start, all of the types, because again, we're using TypeScript. Something that's incredibly powerful is to be able to use Zod to define what all of our types are, so that when we interact with a form, our inputs are validated against the types that we set it out to be, right? Just like kind of this mini inline version here, where we're providing icon, label, and value. They've got to be this value. If someone were to not pass in a value, it would throw an error because we're expecting a string. Label is the same way. If someone didn't provide a React node, they provided a invalid object compared to a React node, then it would also return an error. So we're just building in type safety into our applications, right? Making sure that everything is cohesive. So the next step here, let me just collapse everything so that we can focus on it. We're going to the library folder here, lib, and we're going to be adding a new file here, which will be contact form .ts. And let me just grab the first part here that I wanted to talk about. So we're going to be importing Z from Zod. And here you can see how you can create a Zod object, which provides not just the types, but some of the conditions that you might have around a particular variable. So not just that we're saying that name here, that is part of the contact form schema, needs to be of type string, but we're also saying that it has to be trimmed, so no trailing spaces and no leading spaces. So we're just removing any spaces that someone might have accidentally, hit space and then entered in a name, or entered a name and hit space afterwards. Here, it must be at least 2 characters. Funnily enough, my name is, I often go by G. My full name's George, but you know, interesting, because like I would, you know, fix this convention for myself. Usually you do 2, just so that someone doesn't put in, just a random letter and just get through. But my name is literally G. I guess I would have to put in my real name, so that's fine instead of my nickname. And then max 80 characters. If someone has a longer name than 80 characters, they're probably used to truncating it a little bit. Now here we have an email. So an email will be of type string. We're going to have it trim again, and then we're going to set it to all lowercase in case someone, decides to introduce capitalized letters. We're just going to smoothen things out and put it all lowercase. And the resulting string from these 3 checks that Zod basically does will then get piped into this, and this is, you can imagine, basically a second Zod check that's being done on the resulting string from these 3 steps here. And we're basically checking to make sure that it is a valid email after trim to lowercase, ensuring that it's a string, and then ensuring that the email is under 254 characters. Then topic here, we have more of the same, and then message, again, the same thing, just with different min-max numbers. So that's the contact form schema. So we're adding in 3 types here. We have the contact form values, which is just the typed versions of this Zod object here. Then we have the form contact field here, where we're grabbing all of the message, topic, email, name, the fields that belong to this object, and then any errors that we may have. And so that's stored between the contact form label and any errors that we may be having in the future. So we just have, message to error, topic to error, all that type of stuff, basically to grab, whatever issues that we might have within min-max, or, wrong email, all that type of stuff, or wrong email format, right? All that just gets compiled together. The next thing that we're going to be adding is a contact form state. So we have multiple different fields here in this type. So we have OK, which is a Boolean, submission ID, pretty straightforward, email status, either sent or failed, the timestamp at which we sent it, the errors, right, being recorded as needed within state, the actual error that's appearing in the form, and then a message as well. So why do some of these have an undefined value? Well, it's just that when we're in an initial state, right, where nothing has been submitted, nothing has been attempted to submit, no email has been sent yet, all that type of stuff, all of those will start at undefined, and then when we have a value, we seed it, right? A lot of times it doesn't make sense, like sent or failed, like I guess technically you could add like another one that's like none, right? Or you could just have it be undefined. Like I could see you doing this, right, and it making sense. I'm not going to do that because that would require refactoring things potentially. So I'm just going to leave it the way that it is in my master code that I've written. But, just based off of this, right, you could have done it that way. But as for the others, I think all of them starting undefined. The only other way would be to have like empty string, but there isn't really a way to do it within a type to have it, be by default like that, right? Okay. The last part of this file will be this bit here. So we have the initial contact form state, right? So the only one is really OK, which is false. Suppose we could remove these, right, and go back and, have individual states, right, that match that. So, submission ID would be empty, email status, right, would be, no email, right? So on and so forth, right? Blah, 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 blah. But for now, we'll just keep the, handling with undefined, keep things simple, and not remove everything. So yeah, that's the only initial contact form state there, just to set that to false. Then we have a function here, parse contact form data. And that basically just goes through all of the form data and grabs it based off of the form fields that we're going to be getting it from. So name, email, topic, and message. All of them have a corresponding part of the contact form schema. So we're just going to want to do safe parse, which is from Zod, to be able to safely parse things so long as they match, right, the schema that we put out here. Then the actual way to work with contact form errors here. So basically, we pass in an error of type Zod error, and basically it goes and for each of the errors that we have and any issues that might be had, right, it combines the field here with the actual message to compile the contact form field errors that we defined here. So yeah, it basically takes just a raw error that's being outputted by a form whenever a user provides an issue, and this one basically goes through and is able to convert it into a format that is more easily usable by us, right? As you can see, right, like Zod error, this whole thing, right? We can't use this in TypeScript. We would then convert this format here to this format so that we can use it in just our regular TypeScript. So that caps off that form, or that contact form kind of helper file, which is why that it's in library for us to be able to reference throughout different files, but for now, just in the home page, right, the home app page. So let's go back to the app page here, and we're going to add some things. So what we're going to do is, okay, so the first thing that we're going to add in here is the field error component, which will render our error message in here. Now, an error message could potentially not exist, right, when we are in either the initial state or the user has done everything correctly, thus not needing an error. We don't have to provide anything. So we have here a little conditional check here. So if message is undefined, meaning there is no error message, then we return null. Otherwise, we'll return this p tag here with a red text colored message. So that's the first helper component there. Then the next one, which we can add, let's just do them in ABC order above this. And we'll need to import contact form state. We'll grab it from @lib/contact form. We have here a result banner. So if we have a form error, then we're going to have the form error appear in a little red box, right? So we have a slightly thicker border here, and almost pink background with dark red text. That'll appear if there's an error. Otherwise, we're not going to return anything. Then next, inside of the home page, we're going to add in this here. So we're going to go through it step by step, along with all the imports. So we're going to grab use state here, and we're going to have our state stored here along with a setter. So a function that allows for us to modify the value of state and to pass into use state our initial state, which if we hover over this, it's contact form state. We can actually hover over this one here to see the parts of it. So we have OK, submission ID. We just went over this. So hopefully you didn't forget. But yeah, all of these are going to be passed into our state here. We have a handle submit function here, which will return type submit event handler, and we're passing in HTML form element here, so an interface that represents an element in the DOM. And our case here, it's a form element. So sometimes you might want to write E, right? E is the standard convention. If you see it around in a lot of code bases, a lot of people just write E. I'm just putting it out here that it's fully event, and we have prevent default here. So what is prevent default? So in our form, basically, if we hit enter and trigger a submission, the default behavior is to refresh the page, right? Some form of interaction on the UI has existed, and so the default behavior correspondingly is to refresh the page. Now, unfortunately, if we're trying to do things like set our state or submit things up to the database, the refresh interrupts it, right? And then we start again from scratch. We lose our existing state because in a refresh page, things that are quote unquote volatile, like state, that are not stored into either non-volatile storage, right? But into the database, which is storage somewhere else, non-volatile storage somewhere else, or local storage, which is stored on the browser itself or on the local device. Then obviously if you refresh the page, we're just starting from scratch, right? Which is not the behavior we want. We hit prevent default here. It's basically just to say in code that we are going to be handling the behavior. Don't handle it for me. So we're going to be using parse contact form data here. We're going to grab it from libs contact form. And we're going to be passing in here new form data. And we're going to be passing in event.current target. And so the return type for this is fairly simple, right? Our Zod safe parse result, which is name, email, topic, message, all of the different fields that we're going to be needing. And then if parse is success, which is part of Zod, right? If it is, then we're going to set the state. And we're going to grab our flattened contact form errors. So if there is any errors, we're going to pass into errors something reasonable, which is of type string. And remember that it's a partial record, right? So we're going to be connecting message, name, email, or topic. One of these four have some form of error. So we're going to connect the error message with that field errors right there. And then we're also going to say in the form error there, fix the highlighted fields and try again. And then if we are successful, right, then we're just going to pass through, reset the state, right? Along with the form error validation passed, the server action arrives in step 5. So we will add that in later on. But for right now, this is just where we're currently at. Let's see. Yeah, so that all looks good there. Then we need to wire the proof panels panel here with all of our proof items. So let's see here. Our value here, right, that we're going to be removing Zod rules in step 4. We're instead going to do state dot submission ID, otherwise waiting for submission, right, to submit, or just say waiting for submit. Cool. And then we need to do the same. So we'll just copy this and put it for the email. Check. Oh, whoops. And this one is actually not for the submit ID. This is for the database. My apologies. And we will do Zod rules in step 4, which we haven't gotten to yet. But yeah, these two, submission ID, and this one is email status. So there we go. So this is kind of a in process state. So, if we don't have any submissions, then obviously we don't have any proof to be able to showcase. Great. And then in our form here, we need to attach our handle submit function. So we're going to do on submit. We're going to pass in handle submit here. And then underneath each one of the inputs, we are going to put in one of the field errors that corresponds with that particular input. So in this case, it's email. So the message that we're going to do, state.form error, if it exists, dot email. What is wrong with this? Let's see here. Oh, not form errors, field errors. There we go. And then dot email. Great. And then we're just going to copy paste this and make sure that we remember to change every single one of these. So this one is topic. This one is going to be message. And then I think we missed one on the top here. Yes. And this one is name. Great. And then all the way below our submission here, this button, we're going to put result banner. And then we're going to pass in state. And that's going to be state. Great. Awesome. For our next step here, we're going to close the page here. We're going to go up to our app. We're going to create a new folder, and this is going to store our actions. And even though I labeled it as actions, we're really only going to have one for our contact form, but it's good convention if you're using server actions to put all of them inside of an actions directory here. And we're going to create contact form.ts here. And let me just grab it real quick. And let's paste it in here. So from the top here, we're going to use server. We're going to assert that this is a server component and that what we're doing in here, right, around our server action is going to be on the server side, not on the client side. So what are the differences within that? So Next.js is a full stack framework, which means it has features of it like server-side rendering and in this case, server actions, right, that happen on the server wherever our website is being hosted. And at the end of this walkthrough, we're going to use Resend, the creators of Next.js, in order to deploy our project. So where we've hosted our website, consider that area to be the server. It's some computer somewhere, generally in a cloud environment that runs things as we need them. So when we need server actions to be triggered, those will happen on the server. We have the opposite of that, or complementary to it, depending on how you look at it, the client side, which is generally in web development, the browser. And so the user's interface is generally known as the client side because they're interacting with the pieces of information that are being delivered from the server. And so they are the client of a particular server. And so given that separation, server actions happen on the server side and not the client side. Now, why would that be? Well, very often we want to do that because it's generally either closer to data or being triggered in a manner where we want our client side to be as quote unquote thin as possible, right? For the least amount of things to happen on the client side to make it as performant as possible. So doing something like querying a database and then waiting for an answer, if it happens on the server side, then it's not something that would, take bandwidth away, literally, from the browser side, right? Because it's not handling all of the different interactions that we're doing within our server component because that has been pushed off to a dedicated computer, right? A dedicated server in order to handle. So that's kind of the explanation for why we're using server components and to be able to utilize server actions in order to query against our Neon database, right? And in this case, we need to submit our contact form. So it's not just reading something, it's providing the initial create action and if we ever have that admin dashboard, an update/delete functionality as well. From the top here, we have a asynchronous function. So with all server actions, they happen asynchronously. They're not occurring in sequence, right? A lot of them can work together in parallel, which makes sense when we're querying something against our database, right? We can have multiple different API calls happening at the same time. Depending on how Neon handles them, they can handle them all together as well, or handle them sequentially, but we're firing off all of our server actions asynchronously, and generally we'll do a wait for an asynchronous function, which means that we wait for it to resolve before we do something with it, right? And it's either a hard gate, or we can grab everything in a promise to do them all in parallel and then resolve them once they're all complete, right? And so asynchronous, a convention. Another convention here is that we're not using the previous state, but a server action will have the previous state provided. And so what we're doing here is just providing underscore previous state as a convention. When we provide underscore in front of a parameter, generally it means that we're not going to be using it. Now, what would be the case in which we would use the previous state? Well, let's say, for example, that we were storing in a contact form, and we are, right? If I hover over state and it's the contact form state here, the submission ID. So let's say that we didn't want people to double submit, right? If we had one submit and they hit the button again and accidentally triggered another submission, then we'd probably might want to block the second one, right? In this case, right, in this simple contact form, we have ways to be able to handle that kind of drop. We do it on the server side, right? But if you wanted to reduce the bandwidth, or this is kind of an advanced thing, right? Like really ensure that you don't have that duplication of effort, right? Even though it gets rejected, that's still a API call that's being made, right? Even though it's getting rejected, even in our server action, right? Maybe it's better to have just like this parse here to quit out early before we do some expensive things like creating a date, creating a UUID, getting the database, trying to insert, so on and so forth, right? So yeah, that's generally, like, there's probably a lot of different ways that you could use the previous state. We're just not using it in there, in this server action. Now, we also provide the form data in and of itself. As I said before, we parse it to get it into name, email, topic, and message. If there's an issue with the parsing, then we're going to return that error. Then we're going to grab the current date and time, and we're going to create a submission ID, right? And it's going to be a random UUID. We're using V4. I think some people have said that, you should probably think about moving up to V6, but just for the sake of the tutorial, and we're just going to use the MDN standard version here for TypeScript. Then inside of a try catch, so we're going to attempt to do something, and then the catch here is for error handling. So what are some of the things that could fail? Well, we could have an issue with getting the DB. Like, for example, if we forgot to provide the database URL, we misspelled it, there's a connection issue. We're not able to get information from the database. And generally, I don't think this step actually does that. But this next step, connectivity issues, would be important, right? If we attempted to insert and we got back a 404 because, the database wasn't found, or we had a timeout error, multitude of issues, right? We want to be able to catch it here and then be able to provide to the user what type of error happened, right? And so, if it's just a generic error here, like, hey, we couldn't save your message, please try again. If there is some form of error, we'd want to write it to the console log and then be able to say, hey, it was this submission that failed, right? And so just trying to provide information there, but also catch any potential errors. And then lastly, if nothing went wrong, then yeah, if nothing went wrong. Interesting. Oh, because we're setting it to failed. I was wondering why we set it to failed here. We're setting it to failed not because it's an error state, but instead it's just because we're going to default fail it for now until we actually add in our notification email. Because obviously, if we haven't hooked up and are using Resend, then our email status is failed. We haven't sent anything. In the future, once we're able to send with Resend, then we can have that check and then return the email status to be what was it again, sent, right? And we'll have another try catch block to be able to handle the error state. So that's our server action. Okay, so our next step here is to go back to our page here, scroll up, and look for our results banner here. And what we're going to do is add here the success state. So if a message is able to be saved, then that's what is going to appear in the results banner. A different way of doing this, by the way, if you were curious, right, is using a ternary operator. So if I just comment all of this out here real quick, little hack here. So if state is okay, right, then we can have a ternary operator. So if it is true, then we return this bit here. Let me just remove the comment, right? And it would actually just not the return statement. It'd be this bunch. Otherwise, which is separated by a colon, it is false that it is okay. And so, let's see here. Oh, we already had a paren, so we don't need that. That's the error there. State form error. So we have the paren here. So what I'm going to do is actually borrow this here, do the question mark for the ternary operator, and then inside of here, we just need this portion. So let me just grab that, paste that in there. Oh my gosh, I was trying to be clever. Turns out not so clever. No, we need to pull that in. There we go. And then, since we have two ternary operators, we can then just have null. And we don't need this parentheses. Great. And then we can bring this all in. So you can choose two ways. You want to write it with all the if conditionals and then just have return null at the bottom, or you can use ternary operators here. Some people think that this is unreadable. I think that those people are bad programmers, but up to you on your personal preference. I'll go with the beginner-friendly version. Okay, for the next step, now that we're done with the results banner, we're going to go back to our home page here. We have some placeholder items here, some initial contact form state, this handle, submit, and instead what we're going to use is a form action, and it's going to interact really well with our server action that we've been using. And so this is independent of what I would usually use in a lot of my walkthroughs with React Hook Form and using TRPC. We're instead going to try to use as much of the native Next.js style stuff just for this walkthrough, kind of spice it up a little bit and kind of showcase the full breadth of all of your potential options. And given that 9 times out of 10, AI is going to be defaulting to these solutions nowadays, unless you explicitly ask for TRPC, it's probably going to use form actions and server actions more often than not. And so I think it's better that you have a firm understanding of how to use this and implement it than to, see the code that AI has written and then be like, well, what the heck is this? And I think for a lot of people that I've talked to, right, sometimes AI writes this stuff and they're like, I have no clue what they've written here. It's so different. So just trying to kind of spice things up and bring a breadth of potential options instead of just doing the same tutorial over and over and over again with, TRPC, tan stack, and blah blah blah. I wish that AI defaulted to that, and unless you explicitly ask for it, it's not going to reach out for those particular tools. So let's go in and start replacing stuff. First, we're just going to copy this and we're going to remove it. So I just deleted this whole chunk here. And in its place, we're going to be grabbing three things: state, form action, and is pending. And we're going to be using use action state. So it's a hook on offer by React. And inside of it, we're going to pass in our server action, submit contact form, which we're going to pull from our actions directory. Then underneath here, we're going to need to provide the initial state. So we have our initial contact form state that we're going to provide in here. Then we don't need to write a handle submit. We already have it. It's this form action. And we have the state. So it's kind of a seamless replacement, right? The state from before with the use state. This is going to be the state that's provided with the action state. And this hook is specifically made so that we have access to this form action. And then we also have this is pending state that while the form is currently, operating and doing whatever, API call, fetch, etc., that the form might be doing, we have this is pending Boolean to be able to allow for us to conditionally render things. This form action here, before I was harping on about e.prevent default, that comes natively with our form action function that we're using here. So we don't have to worry about that. Next.js has taken care of it, or in this case, React has taken care of it for us. All right, cool. So one of the things that's interesting about writing this and using basically for the most part React-based things, right? So the use action state hook, form actions, and the form that we're going to be providing inside of this form tag here. So instead, we're going to have action, and then we're going to be passing in our form action when in here, and we don't need this on submit anymore. That it provides portability. So each of the individual frameworks will implement this server actions and form actions in different ways, right? And so there is some portability here that you can take this code and then run it in, let's say, like Vite or whatever, choose your other React, and with, in some cases, minor modifications, for the most part, insane levels of portability, because most of this is just an interface that's provided by React that each of the frameworks implement underneath the hood in some particular way. And so I think that this, in the reason that it's considered like an AI default, is just because it's going to appear in a lot of different code bases. So when it's they vacuum up all of the training data, this is just going to pop up a lot, right? When TRPC tan stack, a little bit new and a little bit more niche in its usage, right, compared to something that is broad across all different types of frameworks. That's why it just more likely than not is going to pop up more. So once we're done with this, we're just going to need to go down to our bottom button here, and we're going to use this is pending to provide, and I'll do it after the class here, to provide it to the disabled prop here. So is pending. We're just going to provide that in there. So when we are in that pending state, that the form is in the process of submitting, and we're doing some form of API call, or in this case, sending a message, while that message is in progress until it's completed, the button is going to be disabled so that a user can't spam click the send button and just trigger it over and over again, right? It's going to hit once, and then we're going to conditionally render here. And let me just surround this in quotes. So while we are in the is pending state, we're going to say we're sending and if we're not in the pending state, sorry, this is going to be a question mark here. If we're not in the pending state, then the user is able to send a message. Cool, awesome. Okay. And the last thing to do on the home page is to update this submission kind of example slash proof kind of area here. And so what we're going to do is provide, instead of these non-submitted yet, we're going to provide, if I can spell, state.submission ID. And if that does not exist, then not submitted yet. And we need to close the brackets there. Then email status here. We're going to do the same thing. We actually close the braces this time, state.email status. And if that doesn't exist, also not sent yet. And then the last one for the timestamp, this one's going to be a little bit more complicated. We're going to provide a space here. And then after the space, we're going to, I'll just bring this down here just to make it a little easier to read. And we can actually bring this down here. So we're going to provide state.timestamp. And if that does exist, then new date. So we're just going to put it into a date format, state.timestamp dot to locales string. Nope, not date string, just to locale string. And if we hover over it, right, a locale string converts a date and time to a string by using the current or specified locale, and we're just going to use the default one. Great. And then otherwise, we're going to provide waiting. And that's basically it for the home page. So we're ready to move on to the next step. For the next step, I think it's a great teachable moment to be able to showcase the unique spread between potentially having a component be specifically a server component and one being a client component, so that we can kind of have a separation of concern, so that we can have a component focus specifically on the server action side, and then have another one deal with specifically the state management and the client side stuff, so that we can kind of have that separation of some stuff happens on the server somewhere in the cloud, does those interactions with Resend and deals with the API calls, and then some of the other interactions deals with the local side on the user's browser, right, called the client side. And so let's kind of deal with that. And one of the things that we're going to do is first rename this. So what I was going to do was create a folder, as I typically do, and call it UI, right? And then add in a file named contact form, so that we have a component named contact form. But obviously there's a name collision there with action. So I think it kind of doesn't really make sense to have two of them be the exact same. Now, thankfully, we named this one submit contact form. So I think there's an easy way for us to rename this submit contact form, so that an action can be, and let's update all the imports automatically. And let me just go back in here and make sure, where is it? Right here, submit contact form. Good. All looks good there. So now we have an action actually sounding like a verb, which I think fits better convention and is a improvement from the source code that I had. That, when we do our actions, right, I think it makes sense naturally that they are in verb format, that they describe an action being done, right? We're submitting a contact form, not that this is an actual contact form within here. There's no JSX. So I don't know if that makes a whole lot of sense. And in fact, that reminds me, this shouldn't be .ts, this should be .tsx, because we're going to be putting our component in here. And let's go down to our contact form here, and probably, let's see, I can just grab the form part. So let's see here. Where does the form start and end? So we have the form here, and we're going to grab all the way down until we see the next part of the form right here. We're just going to cut that. So Control X cuts it, and then we just paste it into here. Or actually, wait, let's do const contact form. And let me just do this real quick. Yeah, we're going to have some stuff, so we'll return, and then we'll paste all of this stuff in here. And then we need to go back up here and take out this chunk, and then paste it into here and clean up all of the imports. So we're going to do use action state. So we'll grab that, contact, submit contact form, initial state, right? And let's see, what else are we missing? We need an input class. We need a field error. So let's grab that real quick. Let's see, what else do we have? Field error, field error. Was that the right field error? Let me see. Base UI. That doesn't seem right. What was the form error being pulled here? Oh, no, it's the actual component. So what I'm actually going to do is also create a new file here and call it form error.tsx. We'll paste this in here and then do export function field error. Then we can grab that from here. Nope, not again, the wrong one. So /form error here. We don't have input class, so we need to grab this portion here. So this is just a minor refactor that we need to do, and obviously it's going to take time to do it properly. We're going to do export here. This wasn't planned, so that's why you might see me kind of going through the usual coding motion. So import button, import send from Lucid React here, the send icon, and then we have the button. We've gone over this before, so just trying to reiterate it. Let's grab this proof. Oh no, proof item can stay in here since we didn't extract it. What we do need is our results banner. So we will extract this, and then we're going to create a new file, results banner.tsx, or is it just result singular? A singular result does make sense. We're not, providing a whole list of those. Then we're going to export this, and let's see, contact form state. We'll need to import that. Great. That all looks good there. Then we need to go into the contact form and actually import this. And then, let's see. I usually rearrange these. I'm not too diligent about it, just because we copy pasted most of these. Great. And then at the top, right, this is a client component. So before we had to do it potentially in the home page, but it would have gotten really messy to put it all within one page to do both server components and whatnot. So instead we'll have use client be here, right? In our submit contact form, we have the use server here. So we would have initially had to put use client all the way at the top here, and have it be for all of the random state stuff. Nowadays we don't. Now for these proof items, we need to be able to transmit the state somewhere, or we can just extract these and then just include them in our form. That way we can handle the state. Were they in a thing together? So we'll create a div, I think, and just stick this one here. And we'll take this form. Right? And then stick it up here. And then that means that we need to actually extract proof item and pull it out into its own component. And then we need these imports. So I'll just handle these real quick since they're easier. So grabbing them all from Lucid React, make sure that they're all from Lucid React. Then we're going to go up to the top here and pull proof item, add in a new file, proof item.tsx, paste this in here. We need to grab, we can extract it. Then we can grab React node from React. Great. Then go into our contact form and then import that. Great. so let me just check this real quick. Actually, we can just put this inside of a fragment, so we don't need to actually put it inside of a div. And just put it inside of a fragment, so we're grouping those two things together and allow for its parent to worry about holding both of these. So we'll just provide contact form here. There we go. The import actually shows up finally, and we can get rid of all this stuff. Whoa, that was weird. So yeah, now homepage is a lot simpler, right? And it's more presentational. So yeah, I think honestly cleans up the code, and obviously each of these a lot more easier and manageable to read. We're not scrolling and writing a lot of these. I'm just going through, so you can just see where everything has gone. Make sure you put use client on the contact form, and you have renamed submit contact form. Great. So that's our mini refactor there. And let me just open this up real quick. And ooh, come on. There we go. We'll just bring this up real quick. We'll do npm run dev just to start this. And then let me just run localhost real quick. And ooh, a little bit too big. Zoom out, zoom out. Should be, there we go. Yeah, everything should look pretty much the same. We have, hopefully that's visible. I can zoom in one more. All right, so what are some of the things that we are worried about? So we have our proof items here. We have our submission panel at the bottom of our contact form. And so how did this work? So basically this first section here gets rendered. Then we go down and we have the top part of, oh no, the proof item goes down here. Interesting. I put it at the bottom here. What happens if I put it on the top here? I think, oops, go back to inbound. I don't know if that's necessarily better, because I think it was all supposed to be in one row. So let me think about this a little bit more. Was it inside of here? Was that the reason why? I don't remember. Let me check my source code real quick. All right, so I guess that was where I put it in the source code, but I think to make it actually look better, I'm going to try something here and we'll see if it visually looks better. Class name flex column gap y of 2 maybe. And then we need to provide the div on the bottom here. Let me see if this worked the way that I had imagined. Yes, so we have them stacked on top of each other. We have the two things side by side, and there's a little gap here. Maybe I could add a little bit more. Grid calls of 4. But yeah, all in all, I think this would look a little bit better. Like we submit the form and then have this be in the same column instead of having the two of them in a row and then having the rest of the content form. Like this, if you just looked at this portion here, that looks very similar to what a typical contact form would look like, right? So I think that probably would look the best in terms of design. So cool. Awesome. So that should be what the project looks like at this point. And so we can move forward and get to the next step. Okay, so we finished in the previous step creating all of the form and the UI for the form. Now we're going to actually hook up the implementation of the API call over to Resend so that we can send an email as a side effect of someone submitting the form. So the form contents will get submitted up to NeonDB, and then we'll consequently send an email on a successful submission of the form entry. So the file that we're going to really be worrying about here is the submit contact form.ts file that we were futzing around with a little bit before. Guess what? We're going to do a lot more to it than just changing the name. And maybe we'll do a refactor later because a lot of it is just putting more and more stuff into this file and making it probably really long. Um, we'll see if we need to make a major change there. The first thing we'll add is a helper function here, which will be read required environment variables. So we'll pass in a particular name, which will be of type string, and we'll be grabbing that using process.environment name. Now, got to be very careful here to not expose anything. .environment.example here. So we're primarily going to be passing in one of these three parts here, or specifically the API key, the to, and the from, the things that we need to transmit over to Resend. And basically what this does is provides a guard. So we're going to throw an error if those environment variables aren't set, so that we don't accidentally send undefined, right? The lack of a presence of the environment variable is basically going to have, as we can hover over here, undefined value here. And we don't want to pass that up to Resend, because then there's going to be a provider error that we're going to be needing to parse when we can try to localize an error to the point of origin, or at least the closest possible area to the point of origin, right? Because generally Resend is not going to know that we forgot to include our environment variables. So thus, by putting this helper function here and putting the error message as close as possible to the potential source of an error, we can more easily localize and triage any potential issues, right? So us seeing an error, right, name is required to send contact notification, where name is whatever parameter that we're going to be passing in later into the function. Later on, if we were to send something to Resend and the API request was malformed because there's undefined values, well, we would have already caught it with this earlier error instead of reading whatever Resend sends as an error, right? Whatever 404 or malformed API, and you're going to be like, what part did I do wrong? I'm not 100% sure. In this case, it's a lot more clear that we forgot one of our environment variables, right? So that's the point of this function. Then the next one. Now the next item that we're going to add is this function, another helper function, which is named escape HTML, and providing a particular value. We're just going to prune all of the raw strings here with saper versions. So the reason that we do this is in case of script/HTML injection. So we have these starts and ends of tags, some quotes, ampersands to basically prevent someone from putting in, a random link or something that they're not supposed to do, or a command to execute, just so that, there isn't some weird behavior underneath the hood that executes a command that we don't want the user to have access to, right? This is a fundamental cybersecurity protection that you want to provide in, especially when you're dealing with something like emails, where you're allowing the user to provide free form kind of input, right, into something that is critical, like providing an email. If someone tries to do something against the database, right, Neon and some of the other features that are within the language, right, that you use, like if you use TRPC, TANstack, some of those other stuff. Okay, the next function that we're going to provide here is the escape HTML function. So for a particular value, we're going to be replacing all of these potentially unsafe values with their safe counterparts. Now, why are we doing that? Well, we're malforming potential HTML/script injections that someone might be providing into this raw contact form. Now, for sending to our database, we have type checks like Zod to be able to protect us. But for us sending it over to Resend and handling emails, we're going to need a Zod equivalent, or in this case, it's not really handling a lot of the same things as Zod, but more of the very specific HTML and script injections, so that someone doesn't try to provide either malicious code or malicious instructions that would cause us potential cybersecurity risks when we're dealing with, right, critical infrastructure like sending emails, right, and payments that are related to emails. You don't want someone to be able to hijack that, or to provide bad links passed through to the downstream users, right? And so this kind of helps handle some of that. It's not a all-inclusive thing, but it'll protect against the kind of 90% most prevalent potential HTML and script. So we're just going to provide this here as a good best practice. Great. For our next step, we're going to be adding in another helper function here. In this case, it's to build the notification email, and we're going to need to grab contact form values, and we're going to have 3 parameters: the values themselves of the type contact form values that we added: name, email, topic, and message, just to remind everyone; submission ID, which will be of type string; and submitted at, which will be of type date. Now we're going to be offering both a plain text version and an HTML version. So in Resend, their email client can accept either or. And usually when you send an email, right, they usually can come in 2 different formats. So based off of whatever email client that the user has, they might want to see things in either plain text or HTML. And sometimes it's for security reasons, right? Sometimes you might see when an email has been sent and the images have been stripped out of it, right? Well, who knows if that image has a link attached to it, or a unsecure pixel, right? That is actually a malicious piece of spyware or whatever. Hackers are creative. So we want to make sure that with our plain text value here and with our HTML value here, right, that we provide multiple different options for email clients in case they are restricted or permissive. So great. Now we're going to refactor our submit contact form here. One of the things that we're going to do is hoist this const db out of here. And what we're going to do instead is do let db to be of return type of get db. And you'll see in a second why we did this. We're going to do db is equal to get db. Now we're going to go all the way down here, and we have a notification that we need to send in this return. And down here is the reason why we did this hoisting, because we're going to need to use the DB in multiple potential places. So this one is just to do the insert, right? But we're going to need to provide another guard again. So what we're going to provide down here is after the row has been saved and it's successful, right? So that's why it's falling down to this true portion here. And obviously we have this failed issue here, but we will deal with that right now. So we're going to have HTML and plain text being grabbed from our helper function, build notification email. And then we're going to provide 3 arguments to it that are passed in as parameters: parsed.data, submission ID, and now, which is the date. Then we're going to do const email result, which is equal to await send notification email. And we're going to deal with that in just a second. HTML, then we'll have plain text, submission ID, values, parsed.data. Great. Okay, for the next part, we're going to add in the failure condition here. So I know that we said email status failed here, so we can actually remove this. We'll add it back in a little bit later for the case that actually goes here. For this one, let's see, where did we leave off? So we still need to make send notification email. We'll do that in a second. Let me just tab this over. So if the email result is .ok is not, right? So not okay, then we're going to do the update here based off of the contact submission. And we're going to note that the email failed, and we're going to do updated at be this current date. Then we're going to console error out or output to the console that we had an error. Resend notification failed with the notification message or the error message, and then the submission ID that we're passing in, and then the return value of this submit contact form. So okay to be true, meaning that the contact form did submit, right? We had a submission ID, but unfortunately the email failed. We have a timestamp and the descriptive message here. Your message was saved, but the notification email could not be sent. So that's that case. For this last part here, we're just going to have the case where the notification was sent. So we're going to have a console.info, so sending information to the console of the email provider ID that's provided in the email result, and then also providing the submission ID for informational reasons, nothing more. And in the case that a contact submission was successful, then we're going to update things and say that the email status was sent, provide the email provider ID, and then the updated at date. And then down here, we're going to do email status to be sent. Easy. So there's that. Now let's move on to implementing send notification email. So for send notification email, we're just going to go to the bottom here and just keep it. Because we have use server on the top here, we're declaring things that are going to be happening on the server side. I think we're just going to keep everything in the same place here, in the same function or a file, and just do async function, send notification email. And the props that we're going to be passing in here, so we have HTML, plain text, submission ID, and values. And so that is what is going to be passed in. We should provide a type for these. And so we're going to do HTML, which is a type string, plain text, also of type string, submission ID, which will be of type string, values, which will be of contact form values. There we go. And then we're going to specify the return value. So we're going to have a promise, which will be either okay to be true, email provider ID to be string or unknown. Otherwise, it can be okay to be false or error to be unknown. Whoops. There we go. Cool. We're going to close that off. And then inside of this function, we're going to do a try catch block. So we're going to catch here, error, and we'll deal with error in a second. And so inside of the try block, we're going to do const resend is equal to new capital R resend, which will import from the resend package here. And we're going to do read required environment to be resend, and actually better to copy paste it. So let's go to .environment.example, grab this specifically, copy this, paste it in here. Because if you don't paste in the right one, right, then you're going to be running around looking for the typo that you made, and the error that is actually going to return says name is required to send it, and you're going to be like, well, I did provide the name. Oh, it's because I misspelled it. Dang it. And, you know, just save yourself the trouble. Speaking from experience, because this has happened to me more times than I like to admit. So data and error being pulled from await resend.emails.send, and this is the what we've all been waiting for, how to actually send an email from read required environments. And again, let's go back here. We're going to grab the from portion here to, and then read required environment. We're going to copy the 2 here and stick it in there. Then reply to, which will be values.email, subject contact, if I could spell, contact form, $, and we're going to put in here values.topic. And we're going to provide in our HTML, and for text, we're going to provide in plain text. Awesome. And if you were wondering why we didn't have like an environment variable for this, well, this is the email that they provided, and thus that's where we're sending things to, right? They're sending an email over to the person who submitted, and when they submitted, they provided their email. Thus, that's who we're sending the email to. Cool. Great. So below this, actually, before we leave the try, we're going to have if error. We're going to return OK to be false, and then provide the error. Otherwise, we're going to return OK to be true, email provider ID to be data, awar, and ID. And I'll just format these to be the same. Cool. And then inside of this overall error, we're going to return OK to be false, and the error to be submission ID, message error to be instance of error. And if it is, then we're going to provide the error dot message. Otherwise, we're going to stringify error. We're going to turn it into a string, and that's what we're going to return. So that is the send notification email. Pretty simple, nothing too crazy here. Just make sure that you, again, copy paste all of these environment variables in and have that all straightened out. Awesome. Let's move on to the next step. So for this next step, I think that it would be a great opportunity to demo the app. And oh, I just noticed something here. We've already done step 6, so this is now the notification email is now sent. So let me just check and make sure it could not be sent. Okay, I think everything else looks good. Some of you might have noticed that and made a fix, or just went along with it. Sometimes you come back to code the next day and you see a difference or see things that you need to change. So the goal is that someone is going to be accessing our contact form. They're going to write their message, they're going to send it, and then we, as the recipient end of the contact form, should get an email, basically notifying that someone has sent us a contact form entry, and we're going to be notified of it and get the contents of it. So, the email that you're passing in here, right? This to email is going to be the person who's going to be receiving on the contact form. And at some point, we'll do it so that the person who sends an email will kind of get a boomerang, right? They'll get an email that gets their contact form information back, right? Whatever they sent to the recipient end of the contact form, they're going to get a copy, basically. And that's going to be separate than environment variables, because obviously we can't hard code the sender's email address, because that doesn't exist, right? And also because they're not sending anything, they're a proxy recipient, right? So we're just going to be having multiple twos to be able to send things to. Hopefully that makes sense. We'll get to that in a later part. But for right now, let's just pop open the terminal, do npm run dev to pop open our application. We'll open up localhost 3000. We just close everything so that everything is in focus here. So we have our form entry here. We're waiting for a submission to the database. We're waiting for an email submission. And we have this little row here that basically tells us when everything has worked properly, right? So we have a couple places. So yeah, here's our form, and then obviously we also have our email here, email client, where a test email that we're going to send through our contact form will then appear in here. And here on our NeonDB dashboard in our tables, we'll also be able to see the record that we're going to be entering in there of the contact form, right? So not just the fact that we're sending an email, but that in a database will have stored the contact form. And if you guys want to see in the future, we can try to make like a little MailChimp client, right? And I know that would probably be out of scope for this video, but to create some form of a, like, contact form admin dashboard. I know that some people asked for an admin dashboard. So if you are interested in that, do let me know down in the comments down below, and I'll be happy to implement it and go from there. So we have two places where we'll basically see the proof, right, that everything is working. So back over to the little demo website here. First thing I'm going to do is type in my name, right, and then provide in, what was it, Mr. X, whoa, blue. What's the email? Mr. X. Sorry, I don't remember the tester. Just want to make sure that I'm writing the actual correct email, right, at gmail.com. The topic, this will be a test message. And then if you remember from the Zod validation from a long while ago, we need to have at least 20 characters in there. So hello, please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, please. And so yeah, that should be about 20 characters. I'm just gonna well, before we do the error, you're gonna see why in a second, why we don't want to send the incorrect thing for now, just for convenience sake. So we're gonna send this message, and it says the message is sent, the notification email was sent. You can see that the entry is supposedly in our database and the email has been sent, and then we have some information down here as well. So if we go into my email, you can see here's the contact form, right? This is the date in which I was doing this tutorial. The submission ID, you can see matches, so I'm not cheating, right? And then if we go over to our Neon console, nothing in here. If I hit refresh, bam, here we go. The same ID. It might be a little bit small. That's the same ID, right? AD5B, right? AD5B down here. And then also in the email as well, right? AD5B. Cool. Oh, and the email, yeah, I guess I wrote the email that uh, of, let's try a different email just to show that it's not one particular email. Oh my goodness, what's going on with my lights? Are we losing power? So example at gmail.com. We're not sending any emails actually to it, so it doesn't need to be an actual valid Gmail, right? But test a different email form sender, right? And then honestly, this is almost 20 characters. Try to get 20 cares. Cool. So we're going to send this email as well. And then if I go over to the email box, right, different, and you can see there, right, example at gmail.com. So cool. Doesn't have to be the exact email that I'm actually receiving it at here. And then if we refresh this, right, we should have a second entry with a different email address. Cool. Not going to dox myself. So, big problem with me forgetting and accidentally putting my personal email and random stuff. So, it's good. 2 example emails there. All right. So that was basically our demo, and hopefully you're convinced that we were able to get things going. And now for the next step, we're going to be going through and doing a lot of polish, right? Making sure that everything works correctly. So if we were to just say bad user, right? User, did not even a right email, and if they didn't provide their forms correctly, they'd be prompted to include at for a email address, so that's fine. But let's say they do Gmail, right, and they forgot .com. Well, then it gets rejected, right? You got to fix all the highlighted fields. The name was fine. The email address was not fine. Topic was empty. Obviously needs to be at least 20 characters. Now, if you can see, there's a problem here, right, that when we provided the form entry, just gone, right? Should keep the form values constant. And then, obviously the one where the user of an email should get kind of a boomerang back, right? We're probably just going to use the same email address, and we'll hopefully get two emails, right? One as the recipient of the contact form, and the other person who filled it out, right? So that way, to demonstrate that both sides can get an email. But yeah, so that wraps it up, this portion. So hopefully that was a good demo. All right, we're in the home stretch, so just a couple of polished things to make sure that the app works in the way that we expect it to, some of the result states, and some of the form polish that I had talked about before, like putting in an incorrect form value, not clearing the form. And then we'll just ask AI to do a nice visual update and go from there. So the first thing that we're going to work on is making sure that our success banner copy looks fine. So we're going to go inside of our results banner, which I'm not 100% sure where it is. So let me look for it. It is in contact form. So let's just, or no, actually. Let's see. Result banner. Ah, here it is. Cool. So let's see. We have a p tag in here that just says message saved. So we just want to say that and notification queued up. And there's that. I think we did this naturally. Let me just check. So it's a pending button. So it might not have been in here. Let's see. Contact form. Yeah, we did do the sending and send message here. And then all of these. So those are good polish that we did there. And so, yeah, then the next thing is inside of the contact form here. So we have this action state here, but in order for us to save the form values unrelated to the actual action state here, but more focused on the form values themselves, we probably want to create a type for this and then kind of deal with it in that manner. And it's not the type that we necessarily have to make. We're going to go into the library contact form. Not that one, this one, right here in library. And we're going to go to here, and we're going to add a couple of things. So the first thing that we're going to add in is export const empty contact form values, which will be of type contact form values here. And then inside of here, we're just going to reference the 4 fields that we have here. Name to be empty string, email, empty string, topic, empty, message, last one to be empty. And then we're going to add 2 things to our contact form state. The revisions, so whether or not someone has made a revision, and that can be of type Boolean. So basically it's just like, hey, someone's put something in there and they need to revise it. And actually, the thing that I'm going to do here is actually say the number, so that if someone wanted to, so like the difference between adding a number and a Boolean is if you just wanted to save it once, the contact form, then you would just provide in the Boolean, right? So if you just wanted to track it once and then keep it the same, then you would just do that number of revision. If you wanted to have a control Z like functionality, the undo and redo, you would track the number of revisions in this case, right? Like flipping it back and forth, right? So what in this case, just for the scope of this tutorial, we'll keep it as a Boolean, and then we'll add in values, which will be of contact form values type, or of type contact form values. And then obviously we need to add in 2 separate things here. So revision, which will be false initially, and then values, which will be empty contact form state values at the initial point there. The next thing that we're going to do is revamp this parse contact form data function here, and I'm going to split it up into a series of different functions. The reason for doing this is just to separate the different steps and potentially allow for reuse in case we need the form data being modified, not modified, but really just validated at each particular step. So in this first case, we're just going to be doing a transition from raw form data values into individual contact form field types, right? And you're going to see what I'm talking about here in a second. So first, we're going to create a function here, read contact form values. Inside of here, we're going to do form data, which will be of type form data. And this is a JavaScript specific thing here. You can see there's an MDN reference here. So this isn't something that has to do specifically with React. The return value of this is contact form values. And then so we're going to create a internal function here that is only going to be used by the read contact form values. So that's why it's only going to be inside of this function, which is read text field. And we're going to be passing in a field to it, which will be of type contact form field. No need for the import. Const value is equal to form data dot get field, and then we're going to return type of value. If it is of type string, then we're going to return the value. Otherwise, we're not going to return anything, or rather return an empty string. And the reason for that is if the field that we're requesting doesn't exist within the form data being provided, then we want to provide either an empty string or the value itself. Cool. So we'll have name here, which will be read text field. And we're going to be doing this a lot. So I'm just going to copy this portion here just so that we can have quick pastes over and over again. And whoops, there we go. Inside of this one will be name. Then we'll have email, paste, put in email. Honestly, I can kind of do this. This might be better. So then we're just shortening things up a little bit more. Email. This one is topic, and last one is message. And provide in message inside of here. So great, no errors to be found in here. Then we're going to parse the values using safe parse. So let's do function parse contact form values, and we'll be passing in values in here. Contact form values will be the type, and then we will return contact form schema dot safe parse values. So this is just a small adapter, right? And it'll basically take in the values that are in this contact form values and then do a safe parse of it to turn it into basically what we did here, right? And preserve that and validate the object that's being passed in. So that's the Zod step here. And so in this case, we can do both of these steps together instead of doing them in potentially a messy way inside of just one function. So we're going to do parse contact form values, not calling. Make sure that you do contact form values because you might accidentally recursively call parse contact form data, and it's not going to pull up an error because calling a function recursively is valid, right? Just not useful in this particular case. So then inside of here, we're going to pass in read contact form values and then pass in form data. So basically just combining these two functions together. And if you remember in the previous version, right, and let me just do this real quick, right, we had to do form gets inside of the safe parse. This way we're just moving it externally, doing them in separate steps instead of everything in line. So just two ways of doing it, right? Like you can do basically this plus this. You'll have to add it up here, right? That helper function, and then put it inside of here, this thing here. Or you can just do it in this way, right? Hopefully that's an easy to understand explanation. So we're just going to revert everything there. So just kind of showcasing two different ways of doing it. Great. Let's see here. So contact submit form. Let's see, where did I have that now? So inside of this submit contact form, inside of our actions now, you'll see that we'll have some errors that we're going to have to go back in and fix, obviously. And so we'll just start from the top and work our way down. So we are going to need to add something here, not just the parsed values, but we're going to need the raw values. So values is equal to read contact form values. So we'll need that. So actually, so how do I make this? This is probably not as clear. So maybe we can change the naming convention here. Probably like contact form types. I mean, there's also like helper functions here. So contact form utils, right? So the utilities related to contact forms. So that'll be the name change for that. And then we're going to export this function specifically. So you can see that actually separating it out allows for us to reuse this function again. So we won't need this, but we will be using this one and this one. So it seems for now. We might add the export again for later, the other one. But for now, let's see. So this one will be form data, and then this one will take in the values here. Or sorry, it's the opposite. Or my bad. We're actually going to replace this function here with the one that we created here. So my confusion there. So both of these will have export, and this will be parse contact form values instead. Great. And then we're also going to need a const revision state. So when we reverse things and go back, we're going to need to set revision to be true, and then we'll have values, and the values is going to be set to the values that are being read here. Then inside of here, what we're going to do is just spread revision state, and then keep the rest of the form values and whatnot in here. Then after that, we will probably just do the same thing in these other steps. So spreading revision state. And let me just copy this here, go down to this one, do the same thing. And here's the last one. Great. So now no more errors. And then we should update. Let's see, go to our page.tsx here. And sorry, not in page.tsx, this form error here. And let's see. We need to have it have a ID here, and then inside of this p tag, we will have ID to be ID. And then up here, ID is of type string. Great. So then, let's see. And now we're going to go into the contact form in the UI directory here. And then underneath our input class here, we're going to add in some extra a CSS class to help us out here. So this is a field class here, passing in either an error or an extra class. So it takes this input class here and then provides some extra relevant things based off of whether or not we have an error, and then any extra styles that we may or may not need to add these Tailwind classes in there. So yeah, it's basically just a helper to help us deal with the Tailwind CSS classes programmatically. Cool. Then down here, we're going to have some default values for our revision state. So const default values is equal to state, and this should go underneath our state here. It needs to be initialized first. State dot revision state dot values, otherwise empty contact form values. And then inside of the form here, let's see, what do we need? Action, class, everything looks fine here. And now we're going to change up how we deal with our labels here. So what we're going to do is remove this grid gap of 2, and we're going to put it inside of its own div. So we're going to have class grid gap of 2. Let me just move this label up so it could be together with the other tag. We're going to remove that part there. We're going to provide HTML4 to be name. And we're just going to pull this inside of here. If you're wondering how I went up and down, I just selected everything. And then if you do Alt or Command up or down, you can just shift things up or down. And then for this stuff, just put it inside of the div. And then we need field errors to have its ID. So ID will be name error. And then inside of our inputs, we're going to have to add some extra things. So first off, we're going to use the field class function inside of class name instead of input class. And then we're going to pass state dot field errors, if it exists, dot name. Then we're going to have a couple of area described by, and this will be conditional. So state dot field errors dot name to be name dash error undefined. So we're just making sure that we add a little bit of accessibility to our inputs. So it's just basic standard things, and it's just like the unique identifier for the input inside of our DOM structure. So area dash invalid. So we have state dot field errors dot name. It's either true or undefined. Great. And then we need to provide default value to be equal to default values dot name. Great. And then provide ID of name. Wonderful. So that is basically what we're going to do for all of these. I'm just going to copy paste the rest since we've already done it once. You don't need to watch me typing through all of these. So the same thing there. I'm just going to make sure that this styling looks right. Poor copy paste there. Same thing for this one. It's going to get messed up. Avert your eyes for a second. Now it looks better. And then the last one, which is a little bit more complicated, but it shouldn't be too bad. We're actually going to make use of the extra classes that we added to the field class function, since this one's a text area and not a regular input. So it allows for like multi-line and that type of things for the larger message. So we just need to add in these extra classes compared to the other input fields. So we're just going to paste this in here. And yeah, so the main difference here is this field class being added, this extra bit here. Everything else pretty much the same. Awesome. Cool. So yeah, let's save everything and let's try it out. There we go. So let's do npm run dev. Make sure everything's working properly. And then we can open up localhost 3000. Great, and we have our website. Let me just close this and make sure that everything is visible. Yes, it is. Great. All right, so let's add in the name. So we have my name, the email, Mr. X YouTube Tester at gmail.com. Topic is testing errors and test error because it needs to be 20 characters or more.